used to work with Dr. Collins. Just get there.
All right, gentlemen, are we ready? We're back on the record, the State versus Joseph Daniels, and this is, we're getting started a little later than 8:30, but the jurors had to have some breakfast brought in to them, so we're letting them go ahead and eat their breakfast. So we are ready to take up this motion in limine, if I understand correctly. All right, what is the motion? Mr. Taylor?
Our anticipation is that Chad Bailey will be called next as a witness, and we have filed a motion asking that any statements that were made to him or his team during his search of the house at 1112 Garners Creek Road be excluded as hearsay. So that's our motion. Apparently, based on the audio recording that we received in discovery, he and members of his team went into that house and they questioned some of the individuals in the house, and statements were made by those individuals to Mr. Bailey. He recounted those to officers or TBI agents. I can't exactly remember which, but he recounted those to those officers some 2 years later, I believe. So first of all, I don't believe that they're reliable, and they aren't reliable, certainly under the hearsay rule. So also potentially would not be relevant as given the reliability aspect of them, because they would be, although maybe relevant, unduly prejudicial. So I would ask that they be excluded.
All right.
Judge, the state intends to call two witnesses, Mr. Brent Morse and Mr. Chad Bailey. Mr. Brent Morse is a regional director for TEMA, Tennessee Emergency Management Association, and Mr. Chad Bailey is with Murray County Search and Rescue. At around 11:30 to noon on April the 4th, when they arrived on scene at headquarters, they were asked to go over to Garners Creek and initiate a search grid using the Murray County Search and Rescue dogs. And in order to do so, they were to complete a lost persons questionnaire with the family members that were home. And while inside the residence, Mr. Morse and Mr. Bailey will testify that Noah, the 3-year-old at the time, walked into the room and in a spontaneous statement or question said, "Joe's dead, Joe's dead, Joe's dead." And in response to that, the Aunt Joyce, who was also present in the house, picked up Noah, sat him in her lap, and said, "Yes, baby, he's dead." This will be the testimony from two separate witnesses. The state is going to argue that this is an excited utterance. This was not testimonial in nature. This was not a question asked to Noah. Noah's statement was made in the course of a chain of events that would no doubt cause excitement and disturbance in the house. His brother was missing. He had been reported missing. Law enforcement had started gathering at the house that morning. People were inside the house searching. But I think the court will need to hear from both, at least Mr. Morse and then Mr. Bailey as well.
Well, I think an exception to the hearsay rule, we're going to necessarily have to have those statements introduced. Is it possible to call the witnesses without going into all of their aspects of their testimony and limit this hearing to only those portions that are going to involve the statements made?
Yes, sir.
All right, then that's what I would request so that we can try to minimize the delay. Let's bring in your first witness.
State calls Brent Morse.
Step right up, sir, if you will, please. If you'll come right up here, I'm going to ask you to face our clerk and let her place you under oath.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony given in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Mr. Morse, will you state your full name, please?
Brent William Morse.
And will you spell your first and last name?
Yes, BRENT MORSE.
Thank you. And Mr. Morse, where are you employed?
I work for the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency.
And what's your position there?
I'm a regional director for the Middle Region.
Thank you. Let me make sure if you'll pull that microphone a little closer to you and try to speak directly into it, then that would be helpful.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Morse, this is a limited hearing, so I'm not going to go into all of the questions that we would ask you when the jury's in the room, but just some limited specific questions.
Okay.
Let me start with, on April the 4th of 2018, did you go inside the residence at Garner's Creek, the home of Joseph and Crystal Daniels?
Yes, sir.
Was the purpose of your visit there to complete a lost person questionnaire?
It was.
And when you got inside the home and began the questionnaire, tell us what statements were made by the 3-year-old Noah, and give us a context for how that happened.
Little Noah came up to my right side and he asked the question or made the statement, "Joe dead, Joe dead, Joe dead." He said it 3 times, kind of in a loud way. And a lady to my right said, "Yes, baby, Joe dead."
And was the lady to your right Aunt Joyce?
Yes.
Okay. So just to be clear, did you say something to Noah, or did he come in and next to you on his own?
He came in on his own from behind.
Okay. Had you suggested to anybody in the house that Joe was dead?
No,
As part of the lost persons questionnaire, is one of the questions, is Joe dead?
no, sir.
So this was a spontaneous statement made by Noah, and
Absolutely.
he said it 3 times?
He did.
Joe dead, Joe dead, Joe dead?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you're sure what Aunt Joyce said in response?
Yes, sir.
And what was that one more time?
Yes, baby, Joe dead.
Yes, baby, Joe dead.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, are you a law enforcement officer?
No, sir.
And your purpose for being in the house was to complete the lost person questionnaire
Yes, sir.
in response to the report that the Daniels had made that their son was missing.
Correct.
Okay, pass the witness.
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Morse, about what time did you show up at the house?
Probably sometime after 12, around 1.
And when you went into the home, how many people were in the home?
Let me count. 1, 2, myself, Mark Blackwood, guy on the couch, the aunt, 8, 2 children, the mother, the father, myself, Director Mark Blackwood, a gentleman laying on a couch watching television, and Aunt Joyce.
Did you make a report about these statements?
Yes.
When did you turn it over?
Turned it over probably about 7 o'clock that night to the Sheriff Bledsoe.
Who all was in the room when you say Noah said these things?
Myself, Director Blackwood, Aunt Joyce, Noah, and over in front of the television, the gentleman was still sleeping on the couch, laying on the couch.
Who was?
What's that, sir?
Who was that?
I don't know, a tall, dark-haired gentleman.
You need to redirect? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank
Let
you.
me ask this question. Do you know what time it was, and you may have saved this, I don't know, do you remember what time it was when you got there
I'm going to say about 1 o'clock.
in the afternoon?
Yes, sir.
And was there a great number of people on the scene at that point?
There was.
A lot of activity?
There was.
All right, thank you. You may step down, I appreciate it. If you'll just go back in the room they were holding you, this is not your actual testimony at this point, we're just having this hearing. So if we're going to allow this testimony, we'll call you back in, all right?
Thank you.
State may call your next witness.
State calls Chad Bailey.
Ms. Fry. Come up, Mr. Bailey, if you will, please come around here, and I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand and face our clerk to be placed under oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, so help me God.
And I will ask you to speak into that microphone directly so that we can be sure to pick it up.
Good morning, Mr. Bailey.
Good morning.
Will you state your full name for the record, please?
William Chadwick Bailey.
Thank you. And will you spell your first and last name?
William, William. Last name is Bailey, Bailey.
Okay. And where are you employed?
I am currently employed with the Murray County Office of Emergency Management. I'm the Special Operations Chief.
Thank you. All right, so, Mr. Bailey, for the purposes of this hearing, we're not going to ask you questions about everything you did on April the 4th, but this is just a narrow piece of the proof, okay?
Yes, sir.
Outside the presence of the jury. Were you at the Joseph and Crystal Daniels residence on April the 4th of 2018?
Yes, sir.
And you had been called there as part of the Murray County Search and Rescue Team?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Why were you there?
We were requested by Tennessee Office of Emergency Management to assist in the search of a missing 5-year-old.
Okay. And did you actually go to the residence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you hear, when you arrived at the residence, did you hear statements of a young boy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What did he say?
From where I was, what I heard was a young voice ask pretty loudly, "Joe dead? Joe dead? Is Joe dead?"
Okay. And did you hear a response to his question?
I did, from a older lady, female voice. "Yes, baby, Joe dead."
Thank you. Where were you standing when you heard these statements and answer?
At that time, I was standing at the back door on the deck. It's the doorway we entered in through. My foot was in the door, and I was in between the open door and the door frame.
Okay. At that point in time, did you know who all was inside the house?
I knew of my team who was inside the house.
Okay. Who all was on your team?
Retired Director Mark Blackwood of the Office of Emergency Management. Tennessee Office of Emergency Management Agent Brent Morse.
Okay. And did you know, at that time, did you know the names of the residents that were also present?
Not at that point.
Okay. Was there a lot of emergency operations response at the scene that day when you arrived?
To clarify, from our agency or
From
multiple agencies?
Multiple agencies?
Yes, sir. There was multiple response personnel, along with private citizens, law enforcement, state agency and assets. Again, and a lot of local residents just assisting,
Okay.
from what I
I'll
saw.
pass the witness.
Tyler?
You do not know the identity, or you did not, let me rephrase that. You did not, at the time that you heard these statements from the child and the older lady, you did not know who they were, did you?
No, sir.
You had no idea what connection they had to this case, did you?
Not at that time, sir.
And you do not know now whether or not they saw anything that would have led them to say those things, do you?
At this point, yes.
How do you know they saw it?
From my experience with children, children don't lie much.
They do repeat things other people have said, though, don't they?
They may.
So if the testimony would be at some point from this older lady and this younger boy that they were asleep in the bed at the time this happened, they wouldn't have been able to see it, would they?
I can't answer that, sir.
And again, you have no idea if they witnessed anything that day or that night previous.
At that point, no, sir.
Okay. Nothing further.
Anything further from this witness? All right, thank you, Mr. Bailey. We're going to ask you to step back into the room that you were previously waiting for me to make a ruling on this issue, and then we'll potentially call you back in when it's time for you to testify.
Thank you, sir.
Any other proof that the state wishes to offer on this motion? No, sir. Defense have any proof they wish to offer?
No, Your Honor.
I'll hear you in argument.
Your Honor, this meets every category of an excited utterance. The state would offer two cases in support, Davis versus Washington Supreme Court of the United States and Stout versus Stout Supreme Court of Tennessee. I'll move those as item exhibit for this. Judge, first of all, clearly there was an ongoing sense of urgency at this house. Everybody at the house was in an excited state. I mean, let's face it, there was a 911 call saying that the son had escaped. There was a large manhunt going on. There's a team of people inside the house completing a lost person questionnaire. I mean, this is the classic example of an ongoing emergency. Second, this is non-testimonial hearsay. This was not an interrogation by law enforcement. This was a spontaneous statement, not in response to a question of Mr. Morse or Mr. Bailey, but the child walked into the room and said, "Joe's dead, Joe's dead, Joe's dead." He wasn't answering a question. Those were spontaneous statements. And the answer was spontaneous from Miss Aunt Joyce as well. "Yes, baby, he's dead." Second, even if it were a law enforcement investigation, the case law is clear on that. Statements are non-testimonial when made in the course of a police interrogation under circumstances objectively indicating that the primary purpose of the interrogation is to enable police assistance to meet an ongoing emergency. So even if this were a police interrogation, which it's not, which takes us outside the category of anything that's testimonial, it's not, but even if it were, it still is non-testimonial because this was in response to an ongoing emergency. That's the entire reason all these people were at the residence, is because the Daniels had stated there was an emergency. They called 911 because baby Joe had escaped. Excuse
Mr. Taylor,
me,
I
Joe
think-
Clyde
I'm
Daniels.
sorry. Mr. Taylor, you or Mr. Mitchell wish to respond?
Your Honor, I have State versus Gilly, 297 Southwest 3rd, 739.
What's the side again? 272 what?
297 Southwest 3rd, 739. And that pretty much sets out the test for a hearsay, for the excited utterance hearsay exception.
Three-prong test.
Yes, sir.
Three factors that have to be met.
Yes, sir. Startling event or condition must be catalyst for the excitement. There must be a nexus between the statement and the startling event. The utterance must be forthcoming while the declarant is under the stress or excitement from the event or condition. The issue we have here is the nexus between the event and the statement. There has been no proof whatsoever that either of these individuals know whether or not these people actually saw anything. Both of these witnesses are available. Noah is available. Joycey, Aunt Joycey, is available. They can be cross-examined regarding their statements. Not only, and this sort of an aside, but not only do we have the issue of hearsay, we have the Crawford issue. This should not be admitted unless they testify to it themselves. The testimony, we believe, will be that Joycey and the child, Noah, were asleep in the bed when this happened, or allegedly happened. So, again, you heard no proof whatsoever that these two people know that these individuals have, and their statements have a nexus to the actual event that they would have had to have seen. I will, Judge, also cite you to State versus Land, that is 34 Southwest 3rd, 516. An excited utterance is inadmissible if the declarant lacked personal knowledge. They didn't prove that either of these individuals have personal knowledge of the events that they are talking about. There were people walking all over this place, as you heard the testimony. And this child could have heard any number of people say, well, do you think little Joe Clyde is dead? Do you think Joe Clyde's dead? Many people could have been saying that, and this child comes up and asks, is Joe Clyde dead? Because there's people talking about it all over the place. And then Miss Joyce says, yeah, I think he's dead. He's not here, I don't know. That doesn't mean they saw it. That doesn't mean they know he's dead. That doesn't mean that they saw something that would have placed them into an excited state. It means they heard somebody say, maybe he's dead. They can't prove that's not what happened. Your Honor, this is hearsay, and it should not be admitted.
Anything further from the state in argument? Well, clearly, I've had 4 cases cited to me, and in order to make a competent ruling on this, I'm going to have to take a recess and review those cases along with the rule and any other authority that I deem to be appropriate. So we will be in recess until I return with my ruling.
All right. This court is in recess.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back on the record. This court has considered the motion and eliminated the evidence that's being offered and makes the following findings. And for the record, I am relying principally upon a Tennessee Supreme Court decision.
Recording in progress.
Tennessee Supreme Court decision, State versus Franklin, 308 Southwest 3rd, 799, a 2010 decision of our Tennessee Supreme Court to help explain. And also I'm relying upon the State versus Stout case, which has been cited by the state in this matter. And in any event, I'm not sure it's, 46 Southwest 3rd, 689, a 2001 decision of the Supreme Court. So I'm principally relying on State versus Franklin. The first issue is whether or not the statements of the child and the aunt violate the right of confrontation clause as being testimonial in nature. And under the decisions of our Supreme Court, and principally the State versus Franklin, if I can find my reference to it, any testimonial statement of a witness absent from a trial is inadmissible under the confrontation clause unless the declarant is unavailable and the defendant had a prior opportunity to cross-examine the declarant. However, non-testimonial hearsay is not subject to the confrontation clause of the United States. The Supreme Court in this case goes on to help us by defining what are testimonial and non-testimonial. Statements are testimonial rather, and thus subject to the confrontation clause when the circumstances objectively indicate that there is no ongoing emergency and that the primary purpose of the interrogation is to establish or prove past events potentially relevant to later criminal prosecution. In this case, and it goes on to say that statements are non-testimonial and thus not subject to the confrontation clause if the primary purpose is something other than establishing or proving past events potentially relevant to prosecution, such as providing or enabling assistance to resolve an ongoing emergency. And this court's opinion, and I find as a matter of fact, that this is a non-testimonial statement of the child and the aunt because there was an ongoing emergency. This testimony had been that there had been numerous individuals there, that there was an ongoing investigation into this missing child, that the witnesses in particular were there to fill out a missing, or to assist in filling out a missing child report, and therefore it is this court's opinion that it was a non-testimonial statement, so it would not be a violation of the defendant's right of confrontation to admit the statement. So I then moved to the question of whether or not there is a hearsay exclusion of this rule. The state argues that it is an exception to the hearsay rule as an excited utterance, and our Supreme Court has further stated that in order for a statement to meet the excited utterance exception to the hearsay rule, a statement must first meet three requirements. First, a startling event or condition must occur that suspends the normal reflective thought processes of the declarant. Second, the statement must relate to the startling event or condition. And third, the declarant must make the statement while under the stress or excitement of the event or condition. It does have a competency. The excited utterance exception to the hearsay rule has a competency requirement. That is, that the declarant must have had an opportunity to observe the facts contained in the extrajudicial statement, which I take is what Mr. Taylor has been arguing in his particular situation. The Supreme Court goes on to state, though, that the startling event relied upon for the excited utterance exception is typically the act giving rise to the underlying legal controversy. A subsequent startling event or condition which is related to the prior event can also produce an excited utterance. In the Franklin case, a lady was assaulted and the individual left the business, and as he was leaving, a contractor next door was working, and the victim of the assault asked the contractor to try to get the tag number of the vehicle that he was leaving in. So he wrote down the tag number. At trial, that witness did not testify. The man who wrote down the tag number did not testify. The state sought to introduce the tag number, and the defense objected as being hearsay. Supreme Court ruled that, number one, it was non-testimonial because it was in the process of, it didn't meet any of the criteria to be confrontational. or testimonial rather. And then it went on to talk about whether or not it met the definition of an excited utterance. And they talk about different things, but basically it says that the first requirement of a startling event must relate to suspends the normal reflective thought processes of the declarant. Second, the statement must relate to the startling event, but this broad requirement offers considerable leeway such that the statement may describe all or part of the event or condition or deal with the effect or impact of that event or condition. And then it says that the third and final requirement dictates that the declarant make the statement while under the stress or excitement of the event or condition. This requirement considers a variety of factors, including the interval of time between the startling event and statement. Underlying the excited utterance exception is the theory that circumstances may produce a condition of excitement which temporarily stills the capacity of reflection and produces utterances free of conscious fabrication. In that case, it cites the Land case, which is one of the cases cited by the defense in this case. Supreme Court goes on to state the following: we have described the ultimate test of whether a statement meets the excited utterance standard as spontaneity and logical relation to the main event, and where the act or declaration springs out of the transaction while the parties are still laboring under the excitement or strain of the circumstances and at a time so near it as to preclude the idea of deliberation and fabrication. They went on to hold that that introduction of that tag number was in fact an excited utterance exception and allowed that that tag would be admitted under the rules of evidence. In this case, the court finds that the child and the aunt were in the house at the time of the alleged whatever took place, the event that took place in this situation that led to this child being missing. They were there in the house. The testimony at this point in this case has established the number of people who were inside the house and their identity. Noah and the aunt were in the house at the time. Regarding Mr. Taylor's argument that there's no proof that they had an opportunity or that they actually witnessed anything, that is true. There's no proof thus far that they witnessed anything, but it is proof that they were inside the house, and this house, from the descriptions that have been seen by video and photograph, is apparently a fairly modest mobile home, possibly small structure, so that the individuals inside the home could have very easily been witnesses to something that occurred. They may not have. But the fact of the matter is they had an opportunity in this court's mind to observe something. Secondly, even though this occurred at a later in the morning, the statements occurred later in the morning, the court finds that it was a situation where there were numerous individuals on the scene, that the investigators that have testified this morning were there to complete a missing child report. The child at 3 years of age that came forward would clearly have been laboring, in this court's opinion, under the excitement of all of these investigators and all of these people being in the house and the unusual circumstances that occurred, and that the aunt would have also been exposed to this type of situation. The aunt statement was a little more difficult for the court to determine. I think the child's statement clearly meets the definition in all regards of the excited utterance. The aunt's response, somewhat more difficult, but in reading this case law, the State versus Franklin in particular, it is this court's opinion that the aunt's response to the child could also be interpreted as an excited utterance. She responds to the child's statement, and in view of all of the commotion and chaos that was going on with the investigation, then this court finds that both the aunt and the child would have been laboring under the excitement at that time, and therefore could that these would meet the definition of excited utterance. So therefore, I deny the motion in limine. The interpretation of those statements is certainly an argumentative to the jury. You have the right to argue to the jury your own explanation of why those statements were made or however they were made. I do not find that the availability of those individuals as witnesses at trial is required to meet the requirements of an excited utterance. I don't see that in any of the case law, and specifically the State versus Franklin case that I cited. The person who wrote down the tag number that was later declared to be an excited utterance was not called to testify at trial, even though he was a contractor and was readily available. And that was an argument that was made. The Supreme Court ruled at that point that it was nonetheless available. So based on all of those considerations, the court finds that the motion in limine should be denied.
Just for the purpose of the record, Your Honor, I would ask the court, what is the factual basis for the startling event that the court has found that these two individuals observed? What has there been in evidence so far that they observed anything that would be a startling event that might carry over to later?
All right.
And secondly, what time has been shown that the startling event took place? And what proof is there that Aunt Joycey or Noah witnessed any startling event in this case? Not whether they were there, but what proof is there that they witnessed anything happened that would have led to the death of Joe Clyde Daniels?
All right, in response to that, clearly, perhaps I didn't make it clear enough, but for Mr. Lockett, I will. The startling event that I have described as being the event that this court attributes to and therefore accords the excited utterance to be established is the fact that this home was inundated by all of the testimony thus far in this trial by numerous deputies, by searching for this child, that they had numerous patrol cars with their lights flashing. They had individuals there searching for this child. The defendant himself, according to the testimony, was out supposedly searching for the child. The two individuals that have testified entered the home with the purpose of trying to take a missing child report. All of that, in my opinion, constitutes a startling event. It does not require that the startling event be, or that the excited utterance be directly related to the initial. It can be a subsequent startling event. For example, in the Franklin case, the court considered whether or not that tag number being written down was sufficiently connected to the event of the robbery that occurred for the victim. And the court said it related to that instance and that was sufficient. In other words, the woman who was assaulted and robbed came out and talked to the contractor and told him what had happened. He didn't witness it. All he knew is that she told him that there was that she had been assaulted. And she asked him to write down the tag number. He then wrote down the tag number, and that tag number was what the state then introduced, and as a result of that, it was considered to be an excited utterance by our Supreme Court. So there was no requirement in that case that the man who wrote down the tag number that later was introduced actually witnessed the assault. The startling event could be something subsequent to that, and the case law is pretty clear about that as well. The State versus Stout, which is cited by the state, goes on to say that it can be other times, something that can happen after the actual event. If you are attempting to say that an excited utterance could only be that the child witnessed something and then immediately made a statement, then I don't find that to be a requirement of the excited utterance. And as far as the proof that the child or the aunt had the opportunity to see or do that, again, State versus Franklin is pretty clear that the excited utterance is not required to be, it has to be directly related, but it doesn't require that proof be that they saw what happened. That may be an inference in the statement that was made, but nonetheless, I think that the findings that I have made are sufficiently factual under the State versus Franklin decision to allow this testimony to be admitted, and that is the ruling of the court. All right, are we ready for the jury? All right, bring the jury in. When the jury returns, I'm going to first address the two questions that have been written and submitted by the jurors. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. Thank you. As I explained to you, I had to take something up this morning before we got started with the actual testimony, and I've dealt with that situation. But before we begin the actual testimony, yesterday I was handed a note, may have been handed this morning, but I think yesterday there was a note handed, and it had two questions on it. And they relate to a video that was demonstrated yesterday. The questions are, why can we not hear the audio? And then it goes on to say, why are there parts that the jury cannot hear? So that you understand, my job, it's been described somewhat as the gatekeeper. In other words, I am required, I'm kind of like the referee in a sporting event. There are rules that have to be followed. Those rules are written down in our rules of evidence and our rules of procedure. And I have to interpret those rules. So there are circumstances where one side says, you know, that shouldn't come in because it violates this rule. Okay? It's like a review of a touchdown and whether or not they actually cross the goal line, so to speak. But in any event, my job is to make sure that the rules are followed and that they are applied fairly across the board. Yesterday, when we had a hearing, if you remember, there was a hearing that was going to be about 10 or 15 minutes, and it stretched out to be about 45 minutes to an hour, and y'all had to sit back there in that room. Well, that was so that I could tell these folks to make some changes that we called to redact. The term redact means to remove. And the way I've described it before is if you see some declassified documents from the government, it'll have black lines in it. That's a redaction. And what that means is that there is some reason that that information shouldn't be applied or supplied to the public. In this case, there were some things that were on that audio that I think would have been inadmissible in court, and as a result, under our rules that I have to apply. And therefore, I ordered them to omit that. And the simplest way was to just mute it. You could see the events, but you can imagine that if somebody's out there running their mouth or saying something that you don't need to hear as a juror, don't need to be exposed to, and don't worry about what was said or why I excluded it, just understand that I did what I thought was right. And for that reason, you were not allowed to hear some of those things, but you were allowed to see them. It was more important for you to see what was going on than to hear what might have been said at that time. So that's my responsibility. I've done what I think was the correct thing. And the parties cooperated with me in making those changes to that. So that's why you didn't hear it. We're not trying to hide things from you. We're not trying to keep you from being able to hear things that are important to you. As I've explained to you before, you will have to decide the case on the evidence that's presented and only the evidence that's presented. It may be what evidence you don't think is sufficient or you think it is more than sufficient, but that's your decision to make. Right now, I have to decide to an extent if something should or should not come in. Does that explain it to you? All right. And again, if you have further questions, you can write them down and let us know. But right now, I believe that answers your questions. So we're going to go ahead and start the testimony again. State may call its next witness. Step right up, please. Raise your right hand. Face our clerk.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Officer, if you'll speak directly into that microphone when you sit down so that we can be sure to hear everything.
Yes, sir.
Would you state your first and last name?
I'm Deputy Timothy Simmons,
All right, and how do you spell your last name?
Simmons.
All right, and where do you work?
Dixon County Sheriff's Office,
How long have you been employed there?
9.5 years.
What do you do at the sheriff's department?
I'm currently the canine handler for the Dixon County Sheriff's Office
How long have you been the canine handler?
since 2017.
All right. April the 4th of 2018, I want to draw your attention to that day. Did you get a call to respond to Garners Creek Road?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. And you know what that call was in reference to?
Missing child.
Okay. And where were you at the time you got the call?
I was at home.
Okay. So you responded from your house?
Yes, sir.
You call about the time you got there?
It was about 7:30.
Okay. And is your car equipped with a in-dash car camera?
Yes, sir, it is.
And have you and I reviewed a couple of clips from that camera?
Yes, sir, we have.
All right, I'm going to play the first one for you here. I might play the first one for you here. And while they're doing that, Deputy Simmons, let me just ask you, do you recognize this being one of the clips that we reviewed?
Yes, sir.
And is this when you are responding first to the scene?
This is when I first arrived on scene, yes, sir.
All right. And the residence would be to your right, is that?
Yes, sir.
Do you know whose vehicle that is right there?
That's Mr. Daniels' vehicle in the red Chevy that's fixing to pass.
Talking about the car, not
The car, yes, sir,
Right,
the
okay.
car.
All right. Is that you right there, Deputy Simmons?
Yes, sir, that's me that morning of.
Deputy Simmons, do you know who that is?
That's Miss Daniels, Crystal Daniels.
And did you see or do you know if she got out of the vehicle with the defendant?
Yes,
She did get out of the vehicle with the defendant? Okay. And is that the defendant's vehicle leaving again?
yes, sir, it is,
And does it continue south on Garners Creek?
as far as I know.
All right. So after you arrived on scene, after this video clip here, what did you proceed to do?
I tried to explain to Miss Daniels who I was and what I was there for.
And what were you there for?
I was there to help track using dogs to hopefully find the young missing child.
All right, and is your dog, what does your dog do? What all do?
My dog is a dual-purpose narcotic patrol dog, but she also tracks. I was trying to explain to her that I wanted to use my dog as a last resort because my dog does bite.
Your dog is a bite dog, a dog
yes,
that's
sir.
trained to do
Yes,
that.
sir.
And were there other dogs available that you could get?
Yes, sir. I called for Dixon County EMA, they have a search and rescue dog, and I called for that dog to come out, and that's who I was planning to work with.
Okay, so obviously you didn't want your dog going and biting it.
No, sir.
Okay.
I didn't need us to be on the news because dog bit the child.
Sure, absolutely. Did EMA arrive on scene at your request?
Yes.
Okay, and then what all did you do with that?
We went up to the residence to talk to Ms. Daniels about getting a scent article for the SAR dog.
And was one provided?
Yes, one was provided.
Okay. And then what did you do?
We used the scent article to start our track. The SAR dog started in the backyard of the house. We went along the fence line. There was a bunch of trees. We went along the fence line, led out to South 3rd Street. We came upon a rock home.
Let me stop you there for just a moment, just to kind of get everybody's bearings. So if I'm standing looking out the back door of the residence, this fence line and tree line is to the left, is that right?
Yes, fence line's to the left, and it goes at an angle,
Okay.
sort of leading to the right, but it's leading out to the South 3rd Street.
And South 3rd, is there a road directly behind the house?
I believe it was Lane Road.
Okay, and then there's a road, South 3rd, is that off to the right of the house if I'm standing on the back porch looking out this way?
You got South 3rd, you got Garner's Creek, which is where the residence was on.
Right.
And then the rock house that we led up to, Lane Road, is on the other side of South 3rd.
Okay, all right. So the dog ran along the tree line and then ran towards this
Brick home.
driveway ran toward after that.
We went towards the brick house, and we ended up in a pond area behind the residence. The dog lost its track around that water, around that pond. While we were there, we made contact with someone to get access to the brick, the rock home, because it was a vacant home. Just want to see if the boy somehow made it inside the house, so we cleared the house.
So you were able to get inside that house and search it?
Yes, sir.
Nothing
Nothing
found
was,
in there?
nothing was found in there. While we were searching, I believe it was the trooper's hound dog, THP hound dog, that actually passed where we were at, going down South 3rd to McElhaney, which is the next road down.
Okay. Did you continue with the search down there?
After that, we gave them some time to pass. That way, we didn't have two dogs on top of each other.
Okay.
We continued down South 3rd after we gave some time. We ended up on McElhaney Road, and we ended up going southbound on McElhaney. We stopped around there's a bunch of double wides that we just seen off in the field that weren't really put together. So we went out there. We searched those looking for the child. Obviously, we didn't.
Is that somewhere the dog tracked, or is that just somewhere you saw?
No, we just
Check
saw
out?
it, and we
Okay.
figured it was as an area of interest.
Okay.
And we walked out there and anything out there. The dog track continued on down McElhaney until the dog pretty much was exhausted. And at that point in time, we had to give the dog a break and stop the track.
Okay. And that pond that we referred to or we referenced earlier, was that pond later drained by other people, other personnel?
I was told so. I had left the scene prior to
Okay.
them draining.
So you weren't part of that?
No, sir.
All right. All right. And then I believe we have one more video clip to show you. Because your car cam, while he's getting that pulled up, your car cam was left running while you were kind of out of the
Yes.
scene. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's watch this clip. And is that the defendant's car that's just pulled up?
Yeah, in front of the Dixon County EMA dog team, actually, on the other side of the driveway.
And of course, this is sometime later in your video. Is that Is that?
Well, I arrived around 7:30 and the video is stating that that's 9:18,
Okay.
so,
And is that the defendant right there walking up the driveway?
yes, sir.
All right. So the first video we saw was somewhere around 7:30, and then this was about 9:18.
Yes, sir.
All right. Your Honor, as to the first, introduce a copy of the first clip we showed,
22.
Yes, sir.
and then 23 would be the second video clip.
Thank you.
Both of these are the dash cam videos, right?
That's correct, Your Honor, just the two separate clips that we showed. And that's all our questions.
All right. Cross-examination?
The first scent that the dog picked up was going toward an abandoned stone building or rock building.
That's where the track led to, yes, sir.
And just ballpark, how far was that from the Daniels residence?
I would say somewhere close to a half a mile, maybe.
Okay. And then the dog continued to track all the way down McElhaney Road.
We were trying to get a decent track down McElhaney Road, yes, sir.
And was the dog appeared to be following a track?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long, generally speaking, would a track be there? If this child had walked toward the stone building, then walked down McElhaney Road, typically how long would that scent?
It depends on the weather. It really does. It depends on time, UV light, and it depends on the dog. You know, her dog is more set up for those long distance tracks and older tracks than my dog. My dog is more, you know, hey, they're running. We need to get a track started so we can catch them.
But apparently there was sufficient scent left for the dog to track down
Absolutely.
McElhaney Road.
Absolutely.
And how long a distance would that have been if the child walked down McElhaney Road?
We walked that dog for a couple miles. I know that.
All right. What was the scent article that was used?
I believe it was a article of clothing that was out of the dirty clothes hamper.
Okay. And in the video, you saw Mr. Joseph Daniels go in both directions, driving slow.
Yes, sir.
All right. And had he said anything about he was going to drive to see if he could see little Joe?
I never talked to him.
Okay, all right. Are you familiar with the darker blue-colored or black-colored vehicle that passed? Do you recall seeing that in the video?
You talking about the truck
No,
or the maroon?
not the maroon, but I'll see if we can pull that up on the video. Can you pull up that video again? Okay. I'll withdraw that question, Your Honor. We don't need it. Do you know how many dogs were out there working this scene?
At that time,
Yes.
right off the bat, I believe it was just two.
And-
THP Hound Dog and Dixon EMA SAR Dog.
Did you see other dogs later working the area?
I left shortly after we were done with the SAR Dog. I didn't stay on scene very long because it was my day off, and they told me they didn't need me at the time.
Okay.
Be direct.
Just briefly, Judge. So Deputy Simmons, it's hard to say how long a scent could stay there. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
We can't say it was just made, or we can't say it was made a long time ago.
No,
It's
sir.
hard to say. Okay. And at this point, y'all were looking for a missing child. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
All right, this was not like a trying to find a body. Y'all were looking for a missing child.
As far as I knew, that's what we were looking for, was a missing child.
That's all.
Recall.
If a long period of time passes and you have weather conditions such as rain and that type thing, you'd be less apt to pick up a scent, is that correct?
Water actually holds odor.
Water does? Okay.
Yeah, water holds odor.
And as far as a time factor, you can't judge when that scent would have been left?
No, sir. Like I said, my dog tracks, usually we're tracking someone who just ran.
Okay.
SAR dogs are trained to do the older tracks.
And your information at the time was this child had escaped from the house and took off?
As far as I know, that's all I knew, was the boy had wandered off from the house, and all I was doing was helping search for a missing child.
And based on what you saw with your dog, it tracked that boy's scent down McElhaney Road.
I was trusting the handler. It's not my dog. So I have to trust the handler that was working the dog. I was just there to support her.
But you have a dog,
Right.
and you've seen him work.
Yes, sir.
And based on what you were seeing, that dog was tracking Joe Clyde Daniels down McElhaney Road.
He was tracking odor.
Odor of Joe Clyde Daniels.
He was tracking odor. I'm going to assume it was Joe Clyde Daniels, but
Because that's who you're trying to track.
that's who we were trying to track. But again, not my dog. I was there as support.
And the scent article that the dog used
Was Joe
Joe
Daniels.
Clyde Daniels.
Yes, sir.
That's all the questions I have.
Judge, I don't have any redirect, but we may have a juror with a question.
Question. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll step out to the jury room, as I told you, the procedure is, anytime you have a question for a witness, you just need to pass it down to the bailiff standing at the end, and then he'll hand it in to me, and then I have to take it up outside your presence in front of the lawyers, and then we'll come back to you, okay? Thank you.
Judge.
All right, I have been handed two questions. Let me remark to you that we have a very intelligent jury. My interaction with them is that they're a very intelligent group as a whole, and they have questions. They're probably going to have a lot of questions throughout this trial. First question I was handed was in specific, I think, for this officer, and it says, were there other clothes in the hamper, and could this hamper the smell for the dog? I don't know, I mean, this officer can't testify where that came from, but the question could be asked as to whether or not if the article of clothing had interacted, with another article of clothing, could that have affected the dog's smell? Either side wish to argue that, or to ask that question in some form?
Judge, we anticipate more proof will be put on clothing, dirty clothes hampers. Part of the proof they've already heard, further to that, body cam.
If you, I think in order to make this record, I need you to go to the podium, so.
There's already some proof in the record, Your Honor, from the body cam of Deputy Dearman. You can hear Deputy Bledsoe retrieving an article of clothing from the dirty clothes hamper, but there will be additional photographs and testimony about retrieval of items.
Well, the question that I think the juror is asking of this witness is, could an article of clothing that came from a hamper affect a dog's smell or ability if that article of clothing contained more than one smell, is what I take from that.
And I think that the witness should be allowed to answer that question.
All right. Mr. Lockhart or anyone from the defense have any input on that?
Just like to question the officer a little bit.
All right, go ahead. While you're walking to the podium, the second question I don't think relates to this particular officer. One of the jurors asked if they could get an overview map of the area. And that's not a question, I think, for this officer, and it's not really a question that I can answer. I'm just gonna, I will advise them that the evidence that's presented to them will be as you put it on, and that I can't require you to put on other evidence. The state will put on evidence, the defense will put on evidence, and they decide the case on that evidence, so.
And you can tell them that it will be introduced later
All right,
on. I mean,
that's
the state's going to introduce it.
All right. Go ahead and ask your question.
Do you know who brought the scent article to you?
Honestly, I can't recall.
All right. And if that scent article was touched by the person who brought it to you, the dog will still be able to track the main scent on that article. Is that correct?
That's the theory, yes, sir.
Otherwise, if anybody picks it up and hands it to you or the dog handler, that dog is not going to be able to track the scent on that clothing because somebody else touched it. I guess what I'm getting at, if somebody hands you a scent article, even if that person who brought it to you was someone else, the dog can still track the predominant scent on that
Yes,
article.
that's the theory, yes, sir.
And so, officer, the question I think that I would, and I'm proposing that I ask the question in the following form when the jury returns, and that is, the jurors have asked a question, and that question being whether or not, if the article of clothing that you were given as a scent article had been taken from a hamper where there are other individuals' clothing there, would that affect the ability of the dog to trace that particular scent? If you know.
I'm going to say anything's possible, but I really don't know, but that was a article of clothing that was supposedly on Joe Clyde's body.
All right.
And that would be the main odor that should be on that.
All right, and that's what Mr. Lockhart was asking you. Any objection to my asking the question of this officer, and then you can follow up with him as you wish?
No.
All right, then we are ready for the jury to return. What kind of dog, while we're on a break, what kind of dog do you have?
I got a little Dutch Shepherd.
It's a biter dog.
I was just glad he didn't bring his dog with him under those circumstances.
She's hopefully at home sleeping. We worked last night, so. Excuse me.
Well, this question doesn't, y'all have a seat, thank you. This question doesn't require me to do the others, and this is a request from the jury. If we are showing something on the screen, and when we set this up, I remember us talking about that. Whoever's standing at the podium, defense or state, if you're showing something on screen, if you will move away from the podium, what's happening is you're blocking the view that the jury has of that. So let's just try to keep that in mind, so. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I was handed, other than that statement, I was handed two questions. I'm going to deal with the easy one first. Can we get an overview map of the area? I'm told by the lawyers that that will be presented at some point during the case, so that should solve that problem. The second is a question that was given to me, and I'm going to alter slightly the question so that I think it'll get the essence of what was requested. Officer, there were, and this is a question the jurors are asking, there was a scent article, an article of clothing given to you. If that article had been taken from a hamper, a clothes hamper, where other clothes belonging to other individuals was in that hamper, would that have affected or hampered, no pun intended, it would have made it more difficult for the dog to follow the scent?
The hope is that the clothes were on Joe Clyde. We as people shed skin cells every day, and hopefully that would be the main odor that would on the clothes. So hopefully it shouldn't interfere, because the odor should be trapped inside the clothing.
I'm going to allow the lawyers to follow up with any additional questions they may want to ask. Does either side wish to ask any additional questions? We'll start with the state. All right, Mr. Lockhart.
These type dogs are trained to sniff a scent article and then follow that scent.
Yes, sir.
And in most of those cases, you don't have a robot or something pick up a scent article and hand it to you.
No, sir.
So typically, some person, other than the one you're looking for, is going to pick that up and hand it to the dog handler.
More than likely.
All right. And the fact that somebody held it in their hand or is in a hamper, the dog still is trained to follow the predominant scent.
That is correct.
And the predominant scent on an article of clothing from Joe Clyde Daniels, because of skin shedding, that type thing, would be Joe Clyde Daniels.
Yes, sir.
And based on your training and experience, the dog would then follow that predominant sense.
Yes, sir.
Nothing further.
Anything further from the state?
So Deputy Simmons, do you recognize this area here?
Yes, sir.
All right, and
Judge, when we're questioning witnesses and the jury needs to see the screen, we have permission to question.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
In order to not block the view, may we question the witness from counsel?
You may.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got something on the screen, what I'm going to do is have them stand at the council table. I think that was a good idea. That'll clear up the screen for you. So just bear with us. That's a little different than what we normally would do.
so Deputy Simmons, do you see like the triangle of roads there, roughly a triangle?
Yes, sir.
Which one is Garner's Creek Road?
Garner's Creek Road is the road that kind of comes down and then veers to the left. Well, yeah, if I'm looking at it, it veers to the left and keeps on going down.
Okay.
Would it assist the jury to have him stand and point to
Yeah, I believe so, Judge. Deputy Simmons, if you would do that, please.
I don't have anything to help you point with except my gavel. You can walk me
I'll use my hands. This road right here, whoop,
We're struggling this morning.
this road right here is Garner's Creek.
Okay, and then would you point out South Third for the jury,
This is South Third.
and the approximate location of the rock or stone house that you were speaking of?
I believe it's right here.
And that's the pond that the dog
Yes, sir,
trapped
that's
to?
the pond.
Alright, and then is the red mark that's there, is that the location of the Daniels house at 1112?
Yes, sir.
Alright, so you tracked from the Daniels, or if you would on the map, just kind of show us where you tracked.
Back of the residence, along this tree line, up through the field. I believe there was a fence line around this house. We came through the front to the pond area, and that's where the dog kind of had a little bit of an issue.
Okay, that's my questions, Judge.
Mr. Lockhart, anything further?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. Are we finished with this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy. You may be discharged and return to your duties. All right, statement from the witness.
State calls Brent Morse.
Come right up here, Mr. Morse. I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand. Let me place you under oath. You solemnly swear from the testimony you're about to give in this case to be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Have a seat, please.
Mr. Morse, will you state your full name for the record, please?
Yeah, Brent William Morse.
Thank you. And you spell your first and last name?
Yes, Brent, B-R-E-N-T, Morse, M-O-R-S-E.
Thank you. And Mr. Morse, where are you employed?
I work for the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency.
Thank you. How long have you been employed there?
19 years.
19 years. And
Yes.
what's your current position?
Current position is Regional Director over the Middle Tennessee.
Regional Director over Middle Tennessee?
Yes, sir.
And would you give us a brief overview of what TEMA is and what TEMA does?
Yes, sir. It is the state's coordinated agency for preparedness, response, recovery for disasters and emergencies for the state.
Okay. And what specifically do you do for TEMA?
I have, there's 38 counties in Middle Tennessee, and I have 7 district coordinators that work for me, a regional planner, and we do trainings, we respond to disasters, and we help counties prepare for and recover from disasters.
Okay. And on April the 4th of 2018, were you in your current position as Director over Middle Tennessee?
No, sir.
What position were you in there?
I was a district coordinator.
District Coordinator?
Yes.
And did you respond to Dixon County?
Yes, sir.
And how did you get the call to go to Dixon County?
I was, got a call from the district coordinator that was on scene, Michael Reinhardt. Told me he was working in Dixon County on the lost autistic child. And he asked if I'd come up and give him a hand. I was going that way anyway, and I stopped by the address and
So do you know about what time of day you made it to the address on Garner's Creek
12:30, 1 o'clock.
on April the 4th?
Yes, sir.
All right, so afternoon,
Yes.
around 12 to 1.
Yes, sir.
And when you first got to the Garner's Creek area, did you stop at the command center or did you go directly to 1112 Garner's Creek?
No, stopped at the command center.
All right, did you get a briefing at the command center?
Got a briefing from Michael Reinhardt.
And that was your director at the time?
No, sir. He's district coordinator at the time.
Got it.
So
And after you got a briefing from Mr. Reinhardt, where did you go?
at that time, we kind of just stood around the command post. Mark Blackwood and Murray County SAR arrived. Michael Reinhardt briefed them on that. We made contact with a deputy sheriff from Dixon County, and we proceeded to go over to Gardner address, do a lost person questionnaire with whoever was there, mother and father.
So your assignment after the briefing was to go complete a lost person questionnaire?
Yes, Mark Blackwood asked me if I would assist with that.
And I'm going to walk through a couple of photos and
Sure.
Direct your attention to the screen. Do you recognize this photograph as being the address?
Yes, sir.
Is that 1112 to Daniels in Austin?
Yes,
I'll move. Is this photograph what you see on the screen?
it is.
Move that as the next exhibit, please.
Mark is exhibit 24.
If you'll hand that to the clerk.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Mr. Morse, can you identify this photograph?
Yeah, that's the house.
Okay.
Yep,
That's 1112 Garner Street Road?
it is.
And is that the front view of the home?
It is.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
25.
Mr. Morse, can you identify this photograph?
That's the back of the house.
All right. And is the photograph you're holding the same photo that we see on the screen?
It is.
Move that as the next exhibit.
26.
Mr. Morse, can you identify this photograph?
Also at the residence.
Okay. And I want to draw specific attention to what appears to be a pickup truck.
Yep.
What's in the back of the truck?
Junk, garbage.
And going a little bit out of order, did you do anything with the garbage in the back of the truck?
The Murray County SAR team, after the lost person questionnaire was completed, we went outside and they proceeded to search the property, anything on the property, the fence line along the property, the ditches. The truck was completely emptied out.
All the garbage bags?
All the garbage bags was emptied, all the trash was emptied out. Looked underneath, and then everything was placed back into the truck.
Okay, thank you. I'll move that photo as the next exhibit.
27.
And Mr. Morris, can you identify this photograph?
That's the back entrance into the house.
And is this the entrance that you used to go into the house?
Yes,
All right, move that as the next exhibit. Mr. Morris, can you identify this photograph?
that's the indoor, that's the inside of the same door.
Okay? And I'll direct your attention to the top of the door where we see what appears to be a latch.
Yes,
Did you observe that on
Yes.
people before?
it was pointed out to us by both the mother and the father.
It was pointed out to you
Yes,
by the defendant?
yes, sir.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
29.
And Mr. Morris, can you identify this photograph?
That's taken from inside the house.
Okay. And Mr. Morris, when you entered the rear entrance, is that the door we see in this photograph, the rear entrance?
Yes, sir.
And did you see what appears to be toys and whatnot in the floor?
Yes,
Was there a small child or more than one small child present when you entered the house?
the first child I saw was an older child. I'm guessing 8 or 9 at the time. He had a AC/DC shirt on. He was there with his parents. And later, I witnessed a smaller child, probably 2 or 3
Okay,
at the time.
thank you. And before I move on, I want to move that as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 30.
And Mr. Morris, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, sir. That's from also inside the house.
Okay. Is this appears to be just a view from further around in a room, is that
Yes.
correct? More toys,
Yeah, oh yeah.
couch?
Yes.
Move that as the next exhibit.
31.
And the last photograph, can you identify this?
Also in the living area of the same house.
Okay. And Mr. Morse, can you describe what this is?
It's a hutch,
Do you know what was on the other side of the hutch?
a door.
Would that be the front door to the residence?
I believe so, yes.
And I don't know how well you can see this, but you see an image here?
I do.
Is that a reflection?
Yes.
And what are we seeing in the reflection?
It looks like a human.
Do you see a face here?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that one of the children you saw?
Yes.
What about a face here?
That looks like the older boy.
Is that an AC/DC shirt?
It is, yeah.
And do you see a deputy here?
I do.
A person?
Yeah. Another shape, a person, yes.
Thank you. I'll move that as the next photo.
33, no, 32, I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Morse, you
Yes.
have already testified that the purpose of you going to the residence, one of the primary purposes was to complete a lost person questionnaire.
Yes, sir.
Well, what is that? I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but
Well, it's a document that has been around for a while that we use. We teach a lot of search and rescue at TEMA, and we teach that form, and we use that form when we have a person that's missing. It's broken up into, I think, 8 or 9 sections, and they have certain questions that are asked for each section. Anything, the demographic of the person that's missing, age, weight, height, what they're wearing, what they were doing, their trip plans, where they were last seen. It's probably about a 5 or 6 page document that we go through to try to get a better idea on what the lost person, who they are, and what they were doing prior to going missing.
when you entered the residence to begin the questionnaire, was the defendant present?
Yes,
Okay. Was the mother, Miss Crystal Daniels, present?
yes,
Was the Aunt Joyce Austin, present?
yes,
Was Noah present?
yes,
And I think you've already testified that Alex, who was wearing the AC/DC shirt, was he present?
He
as well?
was.
Okay. Was there anybody else in the house that is part of the family or friends, non-law enforcement, non-search and rescue?
yes. There was a gentleman that I never saw his face, it's just the back of his head. He was sleeping on a couch in front of the television.
Somebody was sleeping on the couch in front of the television.
Yeah,
Now, when you started this questionnaire, did you sit down or were you standing? What were you doing?
Setting down, Mark Blackwood had the document, and both of us were asking questions.
So you and Mr. Blackwood sat down in the living room area?
Yes,
And Mr. Blackwood was holding the document?
he was writing the notes. We were both asking questions.
And were any statements made by Noah or Alex?
Alex, not that I recall. Noah, yes, there was.
What did Noah say?
Noah had come into the room. That's the first time I recall seeing Noah. He had come up to my right, and he had stated or asked more, "Joe dead. Joe dead. Joe dead." And elderly lady that was there in the room with us said, "Yes, baby, Joe dead."
I want to make sure I get this clear. Were you asking questions of Noah?
No.
He just entered the room?
He entered from the back and on my right, asking that 3 times, yeah.
He walked in and 3 times said, "Joe dead?
Yes,
Joe dead?
yes,
Joe dead."
yes.
And you, in your testimony, is that what happened after that?
The elderly lady, Aunt Joyce, said, "Yes, baby, Joe dead."
And
Then she reached down and
picked up Noah?
yeah.
Okay. What did you do when you heard that?
I looked over at Mark Blackwood. He looked at me, realizing what we had heard. Nothing was said. The parents then came back and entered the room. They were out. The question was asked if Joe Clyde had a favorite blanket or a toy that he kept, and is it present? Did he take it with him when he left? And they went to go look for it, so they weren't present in the room. And they came back and said, no, his blankets, I think it's a Buzz Lightyear blanket, is here.
Let me be clear. Were the defendant and Crystal Daniels in the room with you when Noah made the statements, "Joe dead, Joe
No.
dead"? They were not.
They were not.
They had gone out of the room in search of an item
Yes.
of Joe Clyde?
Yeah.
Were any more statements of Noah or Aunt Joyce along that line made after the defendant returned to the room?
No, sir.
All right. Did you go forward completing the lost person questionnaire?
We did.
And after the completion of the questionnaire, what was your assignment?
We left the residence. Our next assignment was to search the residence to include the residence itself. I think Mark Blackwood's SAR team did that, Murray County SAR. The crawl space, there were 2 barns, kind of small outbuildings were searched. Of course, the truck that we talked about was searched. The property, if you see the front of the house, it had some high grass. The fence line was searched. That tractor, saw the tractor trailer, the tractor part was locked. That could not be accessed. The playground, there's a little sled and slide and swing set there was searched. The front of the property, somebody found the sewer system was open, is enough for a child to fit in. It was full, surrounded by grass. We went to the deputy that was with us and asked him if he could have it pumped. And he took care of that. He went and had that done, and I don't know who came out, but about an hour and a half later, a septic truck came and did pump the sewer, the septic tank.
So as part of the search of the Daniels residence, the septic tank was pumped?
It was.
Did you view into the tank after it had been pumped?
I did.
And what did you see?
No, there was no,
All right.
just an empty.
How long did you spend at 1112 Garner's Creek in conducting this search?
Probably an hour and a half.
Did that complete your assignment for that day?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Mr. Morse, what time of day did you arrive?
Between 12:30 and 1.
And what time of day was it when you were in the house with the family?
Sometime after probably 2:30.
Now, how many people total were in the house?
The mother, the father, the gentleman sleeping on the couch, the aunt, the 2 children, myself, Mark Blackwood. There was 8 in the house and one halfway in the house, halfway out the door.
Were you aware at that point how many people had been on the scene?
Say that again, sir.
How many people had been on the scene at that point?
I don't know. There's a lot of responders there looking for Joe.
You talked about headquarters. Where was the search being coordinated out of?
It was being coordinated at the property. If you're facing the house to the right,
And do you recall where you were able to park?
I parked on the road in front of Gardner.
Was there a lot of cars there already?
There was,
So there's a significant number of people at the area.
yes.
It was said in 2 or 3 different ways here, but when Noah came in to talk to Aunt Joycey, he asked her,
He didn't ask her, he asked
he just asked.
out. Yes, he wasn't
So
directing
he's
it at her.
asking if he's dead.
Yeah.
Okay. At that point, had you witnessed anyone discussing the possibility that with Joe missing at that period, that he would be deceased?
No, sir. We were still under the assumption we had a missing child.
So would it be possible that sometime during the 6 hours of searching that would have been discussed?
But not by me.
All right, we have two questions submitted by the jury, so ladies and gentlemen, you know the drill. You'll have to step out while I consider them on the record, and we'll come back to you. Just if we are. All right, I have two questions from the jurors. First question is, did Mr. Morse perceive Noah's words as a question or a statement? The second is, was the tractor trailer ever searched? Clearly, the second one of those is a question that's legitimate, and I don't have a problem with it. Either side wish to be heard about whether or not I should or should not ask that question. Well, let's start with Mr. Morse perceiving the Noah's words as a question or a statement.
I believe that was my last question. I don't know if that was something they asked before or after, but I asked him if it was a question or a statement.
Okay.
He responded to that, saying it was a question.
All right. And if that was asked, maybe I didn't miss it, maybe I misunderstood it. That was question that you were asking, you answered that you perceived it was a question?
It was.
All right. And the second one about, was the tractor trailer ever searched? Anybody have any problems with asking that one?
He's already testified that it was locked, so
Pardon?
Mr. Morse testified the tractor trailer was locked, so they couldn't open it, so.
Do you know whether it was ever searched at any point? Do you happen to know one way or the other?
No, I do not.
All right.
Yes,
Then-
and Judge, it was searched, and we have video evidence of that search that will come on through another witness.
Well, what I'm proposing to do is to bring the jury back and make sure they understand that the first question was asked and answered by Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Morse right before we sent him out. The second question, I'm going to ask him if he knows personally, but I'll let them know that there will be further evidence on that issue. Anybody have any objection to handling it that way? All right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and, we're ready for a mid-morning recess. Is there any reason we couldn't go ahead and take a short recess?
While the jury's not in, I would like to ask that moving forward, the district attorney's office is handing.
Go to the podium if you will. The reason for that is we're recording this as well
I
as
understand.
everything else.
Thank you. Moving forward, the district attorney's office is asking witnesses questions about photos, handing them photos to be identified, but before they even get the photo and attempt to identify, it's being published to the jury. Could we ask that those images be identified and that they actually can be authenticated through the witness before they're being published to the jury?
Certainly, what I would suggest we do, if you have a stack of photographs you want to demonstrate with the witness, show them to the defense. That way, if there's an objection before the witness is testifying, we can do that. And I think,
I have no problem showing them before we hand them to a witness. They have seen all of our photographs, and I had assumed that there would be, in our multiple motion hearings, an objection to any photographs if they protested.
well, I think that Mr. Mitchell's point is that if you could have the authentication of the photographs made before they're starting to be demonstrated to the jury. So I understand we're trying to move through, we have a number of witnesses, we're trying to move quickly, but let's, in response to Mr. Mitchell's request, let's just go ahead and have the state authenticate how the photographs were made and give the authentication and then go forward. And by that point, I'm assuming you will have seen the photographs and understand which ones he's talking about.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Then let's go ahead and let's take about a 10 or 15-minute recess, and then hopefully we'll return at 5 after 11, so that everybody's on the same page. So. let the jury know we're going to be in a recess for 15 minutes. So.
All rise.
Recording
This court is
stopped.
in recess. may be seated.
All right, we're back on the record. Just wanted to remind everyone that
Recording in progress.
I'm going, when the jury returns, to go ahead and advise them that the first question that was asked has, Mr. Mitchell had asked it and the witness had responded. Second question is one that there will be further evidence on, so.
And Your Honor, I don't have any objection if you want to tell them what the answer was or have the court reporter read it. I mean, he answered it was, never mind.
I look back at
We can question some more. So.
Well, I don't care if you question him or not. I'm just saying, my point was that Mr. Mitchell asked the question and it was answered, and that normally is sufficient. That was handed to me before he had finished his questioning. So, bring the jury in. Of this building? The jurors have asked if they could have a tour at some point of the Justice Center building. Anybody have any objection to letting them have a guarded tour?
No, Your Honor. I agree.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Before we took our break, I was handed two questions. The first question was, did Mr. Morse perceive Noah's words as a question or a statement? Mr. Mitchell had asked that question of Mr. Morse right before we took our break, so I think it was after this question had been handed to me. And then the second was, was the tractor trailer ever searched? And I'm just going to ask him, but then advise you, Mr. Morse, do you know of your own personal knowledge whether the tractor trailer was ever searched while you were there?
No, sir.
All right, but I am advised by both sides that there will be evidence on that particular question. So there will be some additional evidence on the search of the tractor trailer. All right, and your last question is whether or not you can get a tour of this building. You absolutely can get a tour of this building, and we'll try to conduct that under appropriate circumstances when the time is available to us. So we have a brand-new Justice Center that county mayor and county legislative body has gifted us with, so to speak. And if you had to be trying this case in the old courthouse where we were, it would be a completely different scenario. This is a beautiful building, and it's really helping us to get this case over with in a much better environment. All right, with that then, are there any other questions for Mr. Morse? Defense have any other questions?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Morse. Then you are free to go.
Thank you.
All right. State may call your next witness.
State calls Chad Bailey.
Chad Bailey. Step right up again and raise your right hand one more time and let the clerk place you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, so help me God.
Thank you.
Mr. Bailey, will you state your full name, please?
William C. Bailey.
Thank you. Will you spell your first and last name?
William, William, last name Bailey, Bailey.
Thank you. And Mr. Bailey, where do you work?
I worked with the Murray County Office of Emergency Management. I'm the Special Operations Chief.
Okay, and how long have you been doing that?
I've been employed with them doing this for going on 5 years now.
5 years. And what was your background before your current position?
I'm also full-time employed with the City of Columbia Fire Department. I've been with them going on 13 years. I've been in emergency services almost a total of 31 years.
31 years?
Yes, sir.
So.
Started very early.
Yes, you must have. So in 31 years of emergency operations experience, is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
All right. And what is a search and rescue team?
Our SAR team and what they do, we are deployed for missing persons, people with Alzheimer's have wandered off, children who've wandered off or from home. We assist law enforcement agencies in locating those people, along with, we've assisted State Forestry Service, State Park Service and stuff.
And who makes up the SAR team or search and rescue team?
We have a very broad group. Our team consists of law enforcement agencies, partners, firemen, EMS personnel. We have some park service. A lot of vast majority of them are volunteer.
Okay. Do you use any type of specialized equipment?
We do. We use thermal imagings. We do. Been through a lot of them. Been certified through man tracking school. We actually, our office, our former director, helped create kind of the program that the state Tennessee Office of Emergency Management utilizes now to teach agencies on how to do search and stuff.
Okay.
We utilize a lot of technology, computer-based programs, unmanned aerial devices, and stuff like that.
What about canines?
We do utilize some canines. We have 2 handlers that we primarily use that are part of our teams. They have been on countless searches and made countless finds.
Thank you. And on the morning of April the 4th of 2018, were you dispatched to go to Dixon County, Tennessee?
Yes, sir. Director Blackwood received a phone call around, just off the top of my head, I believe around 11:30-ish, from TEMA Regional Operation, TEMA Air Representative Michael Reinhardt, requesting the possibility of a mission for a missing autistic 5-year-old.
Okay, so you got a
Male.
call for a mission to assist with a missing young boy.
Yes, sir.
Is that fairly common to go outside of Maury County?
Yes, sir.
Do you have an agreement or interlocal agreement with other counties or Middle Tennessee to do that?
And no, sir, we just go off of their requests.
If
We will
somebody
go-
calls and-
We'll go anywhere
Good deal.
if requested.
Do you know about what time you arrived in Dixon County on April the 4th, 2018?
From the time we received the initial phone call request to the mission was actually accepted and processed, we got our group together, we left our offices, and made our way to Dixon County. It was, I believe we arrived around maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon-ish.
1 o'clock on April 4th, 2018?
Yes, sir.
Did you go to a command center first?
Our first assignment, which in the vehicle that I was driving with retired director Blackwood was with me, we were leading. We initially were sent to the Tennessee City Fire Station.
Okay.
Once we met up there, I believe he made contact with either Brent Morse or Michael Reinhardt. They redeployed us to the scene at that intersection. Unfortunately, I'm sorry about that. I don't know the names of the streets. I just know the main road. But we met there.
After you met up with, I think you said Mr. Morris from TEMA, where did you go then?
We got our assignments. I parked my vehicle in a driveway. Our team with their trailer, our support trailer was located and positioned off a side street. We rendezvoused and got our assignment, said a quick prayer, and on foot walked to the home.
Did you go to 1112 Garner's Creek Road?
If that's the address, I believe, yes, sir.
Okay.
The address.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Bailey, I'm going to show you a series of photos. I'm going to show them to you one at a time.
Yes, sir.
First, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, sir. This is a photograph of the back porch, the
The back porch of the residence?
the back porch of the residence we went to, the doorway that we utilized to enter and exit the structure.
Thank you. And Mr. Bailey, I'm going to ask you to look towards the big screen, and does what we see on the screen, is it the same photograph that I've got in front of you here?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll move that as the next exhibit. Same tomorrow.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bailey, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, sir, I can.
And what is that?
This is the interior, the upper left corner of the doorway with a clasp and a fly trap.
Thank you. And
I'm
now,
sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't understand, but what?
A clasp, like a locking clasp.
you said something else too. What else did you describe in that photograph?
A fly trap, a hanging fly trap.
Is a fly trap hanging from the ceiling?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you to look at the big screen. Are we looking at the same photographs?
Yes, sir, we are.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
34.
And Mr. Bailey, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, I can.
And what is that?
That is a key that appears to be to a master lock that was located on the mantle against the wall.
Okay. The mantle inside the residence that you went to?
To the left, yes.
Okay. And now look at the big screen, please. Oh,
Yes, that is it.
same photograph?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bailey, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, I can.
And what is that?
That is a master padlock
Okay. And where is that master padlock located?
laying on a mantle on the fireplace, above the fireplace.
Thank you. Now I'll ask you to look at the television. Is that the same photograph?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I need to make those last two photographs, the next two exhibits, I think they'll be 36 and 37.
35 and 36.
There's one off. Mr. Bailey, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, sir. This is looking from the interior of the home, looking out that doorway. The corner of it, several toys collected in the corner, and some toys standing by the fireplace with the TV on the right.
Thank you. And I'll ask you to look at the big screen.
This is the same photograph.
All right. I'll move that as exhibit 37. Now, before we go on, Mr. Bailey, you see all the toys. Is that how the toys appeared when you arrived?
Yes, sir.
And you, about what time did you enter the residence, if you can recall?
Approximately maybe 25, 30 minutes after we had arrived initially on scene, so I would say putting that around maybe 1:30-ish.
And can you identify this photograph?
Yes, I can.
And what is that?
That is of the coffee table.
As it appeared when you arrived?
Yes.
All right. And is it the same photograph that we see on the big screen?
Yes, sir.
I'll move that as the next exhibit, please.
38.
I want to leave that photograph up on the screen for just a minute. Mr. Bailey, when you first arrived at the residence, did you go all the way inside, or where were you?
No, sir. Director Blackwood and Brent Morse with TEMA, they were going in to conduct a lost person questionnaire. That is a form that we perform on every operation we go on. That's one of the first things we do before we really do anything to get our basic information on who we were looking for. At that time, I stood at the doorway that was shown in the photographs.
The doorway with the latch at the top?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that's where you were standing in the doorway?
Yes, sir. I had my foot in the doorway and stood in the corner. It's hard to describe it.
Sure.
I had my foot holding the door open where I was listening and observing and taking mental notes at that point.
Okay.
I did not want to go in at that point.
And you testified that the purpose for Mr. Morse and Blackwood going inside was to complete the lost persons questionnaire?
Yes, sir. They, in certain situations in the past, the more people in there kind of causes some issues. So the less people in, it kind of makes it a more better environment for the people to open up and discuss things.
Okay. As you were standing at the door, did you hear a child say anything?
I did.
What did you hear?
I heard a young child voice speak kind of loudly, come in and say, "Joe dead? Joe dead? Joe dead?"
And how many times did you hear that?
Approximately 3 to 4 times.
Okay. Did you hear a response?
I did hear a response. It was of an older female voice. "Yes, baby, Joe dead."
All right. And you're sure that a child said, "Joe dead, Joe dead, Joe dead"?
At the time, again, I have children of my own, and it was not an adult, mature voice. It was a younger voice.
Okay. Now, could you see the person or child that made the 3 remarks, "Joe dead, Joe dead, Joe dead"?
At that point where I was positioned, no, sir.
Okay. You could only hear.
I only heard.
And could you see the person that responded, "Yes, Joe's dead"?
From where I was standing, not at that point, no, sir.
Okay. What did you do after you heard those statements?
Mentally, I thought to myself, this just escalated. Did I just hear what I just heard? I looked at a deputy who was standing on the other side of the door, who was there with us, asked him, "Did you just hear that?" His response was, "No, I didn't hear anything. I couldn't hear nothing."
And what was his position in relation?
He was more standing off to the left or side, farther away from the door, not as close as I was.
In the exterior of the home?
Exterior of the home. At that point, after collecting my thoughts, I migrated into the doorway with the door closed behind me.
When you went inside the residence, did you have a conversation with the defendant?
Yes, at that point, Mr. Daniels was standing over near the fireplace or had come up to me at the fireplace.
What did the defendant tell you?
Most every question I'll ask people in a type of situation is what is your relation? He explained it. He was the father. Some conversation was carried on. I don't remember the particulars to it, but I asked the question about the lasp on the door, and he explained to me, "Yeah, we lock it because he likes to run off." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, was it locked?" His response was, "I found the lock in the toy box."
The defendant told you that he found the lock in the toy box.
Yes, sir.
And was there a toy box or anything?
The toy box to the right, there was 2.
Okay.
There was like a toy box in the corner and then like a wagon, a reddish toy box that had the other toys piled on it.
Did the defendant tell you how the lock got back on top of the mantle?
I asked him something to the fact, "Well, how do you think that happened?" Or how he said, he believed that he pushed that table over, climbed up on top of the table, found the key and unlocked it. And then at some point must have pushed that table back to where it was and exited the residence, all while they were asleep.
That's what the defendant told you?
That is what was told to me.
That the missing child had pushed the coffee table to that door?
Yes, sir.
The door that you were standing in?
Yes, sir.
And he told you that he found the lock?
Yes,
and
sir.
the key? And unlocked the padlock?
Yes, sir.
That's what the defendant told you?
Yes, sir.
And the defendant also told you that he recovered the padlock
Yes, sir.
from the toy box?
Yes, sir.
And you saw a photograph of the key on the mantle, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. What did you do then?
I mentally noted that.
What did you think?
No.
Objection.
What did he think? Is that what you asked?
Yes, sir.
It would seem to me to be asking for him, for his impression or opinion about something, would it not?
Yes.
How is that admissible?
Well, he's just described what the defendant told him as to how Joe Clyde Daniels escaped, and he's standing in the room observing whether it was possible to move the table over to the door and climb up and unlock the padlock and push the table back over to the center of the room and leave without anyone noticing it.
I think under the way you have the question formed, you're asking for his mental impression or whatever. I think that under the present form of the question, I would have to sustain the objection.
Yes, sir.
You can rephrase your question.
Yes, sir. What did you do next after the defendant made those statements to you?
Not much. I just explained we'll do our best to try to locate him. They were still finishing up the loss questionnaire at that point. Once that was complete, then we had permission from them to have 2 of our team members clear the structure from top to bottom. That's a standard practice we do. We do another search of our own. So we were at that point 100% accurate that the child was not in that trailer or
Okay.
that home.
As part of the search and rescue team, did you go to other residences, you and/or members of your team, with K-9 and search?
Yes, sir, we did.
All right, I'm going to ask you if you can identify this map.
Yes, I can.
I want you to hold that for just a second, but I'm also going to put it on the screen so that everyone can see it. Now, Mr. Bailey, we have placed some yellow thumbtacks at different addresses. Are those addresses that you and/or members of your team went to with a K-9 unit?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to step over to the big screen.
I'd like to add, yes, with a K-9 unit and by foot.
K-9 unit and foot.
And foot.
And I'll start with the location in which the lost person questionnaire was being completed. Is that 1112 Garden Street?
That is correct.
All right. And how many people were on your team that day?
Off of memory, roughly, maybe we may have had 10, maybe.
And do you divide up and go to separate places, or do all 10 members go to each individual location?
Yes, we were divided into groups of 2 to 3.
And where did you go specifically after leaving 1112 Garner's Creek?
After we, Director Blackwood and myself and Brent, we exited the structure. We discussed what we heard. It was then told to me who made what comments. We then broke off into multiple assignments. We got our assignments, set up our org chart and deployed. My attempt, at that time, my assignment was to do a hasty search of the 1112 Garner's Creek property. I began around the house, and then my perimeter expands each time, looking for anything I could, that's out of the ordinary.
Did you find anything in the front yard?
In the front yard, we did locate a underground septic tank that was uncovered. That was noted. We then located the vehicles, of course, where they were parked.
Roughly in the
Yes,
area of the
yes, we located that. I then checked the swing set to the left of the property. Kind of see a little dot there where your stick is. That tree line, there was a chain link fence that ran that length. We checked it, worked my way to the backyard, up around the dry creek, and then to the northeastern corner where you're pointing to a group of trees and bushes where I noticed a cleared area that's kind of like a little play area that maybe some kids would have played in a bushy area.
Did you observe anything in that location?
Yes, I did. Some disturbed ground and some vomit with appeared to be corn kernels and stuff in it, located in that.
Now, when you are on a mission, a search and rescue mission looking for a lost, missing person, do you physically collect evidence such as vomit when you observe it?
That was not my role, and we do not. We allow law enforcement to collect.
But you did indicate the vomit in one of your sketches, is that correct?
Yes, it is noted in in our first org chart assignment, and it is noted on the back in the rough sketch.
And where did you proceed after noting the vomit on your sketch?
From that point, I believe we cleared that area and reported back to where we started.
Yep.
After we cleared that, and then we got another assignment. I believe that next one was over to the 1115 Garner's Creek. We checked it. Well, my assignment, yes. We cleared around that home, same process from an inner circle to an outer, looking for any types of tracks, anything like that, anything out of the ordinary. And then we met back up at the roadway, got a reassignment to the house with the red roof. We cleared that one along with that barn that is down to the bottom left.
Where I'm pointing now?
Yes, sir. We cleared that. At some point, I believe the dogs had picked up some type of track in that cornfield at the time. To your bottom left, right there. Yes. That was cleared. I do believe it was cleared by UAV also. My team was then redeployed to 1101. That home was locked. No one was home, but we did clear the exterior and the crawl space. By opening the crawl space, it was observed there were spider webs and cobwebs that had not been disturbed. That's a good indication that there was nothing there, nothing had tried to go in. We cleared that barn to the southeast of it also. Nothing was observed there. We then reported back to command.
And at the time, was there a command post set up?
Yes, their command post was up there. Our unified command was located at the end of the driveway of Garner's Creek. At there, that's where we set up our our team's command post. Yes, sir.
The larger command post here?
Yes, it was all, everybody, the TBI had their vehicle there. I believe Dixon County EMA had their command truck there, or rescue truck. I believe the Dixon County Sheriff's Department had a trailer there that we met in later that evening with Sheriff Bledsoe.
And when you arrived on scene at approximately 1 o'clock or whatever time, how many folks were gathered in this general area as far as search and rescue, emergency services, citizens there to volunteer?
I could not tell you how many because it was countless. At the time we arrived, of course, everyone, it seemed like in Dixon County and Middle Tennessee was there, along with law enforcement agency partners, local agencies. There was a dive team or water team in that big creek, that big pond, trying to search it. Yes, they had a boat in it, searching it. There's multiple ponds in that area, just on the northern side above the frame. Yes, above that. I mean, there were searchers everywhere. ATVs, motorcycles, skateboards, everything you can think of, just about. But there was multiple community members there, and at that time, everyone was under the impression that they are looking for a missing child.
I'll move the map as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 39.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bailey, you completed, well, first, can you identify this?
Yes, I can.
What is that?
This is our org chart.
What does that mean?
Through NIMS, we utilize this form of a chart to make assignments, to group people together for operations to where it helps control and span of control. So you understand how many people, you know where people are, and people understand who they report to, and a chain of command.
Okay. I'm going to ask this to be displayed on the screen. So you called it an org chart,
Yes, sir.
and what is NIMS?
NIMS is, it is a nationwide program that is based on the Incident Command System. It was initially started out west from the Fire Association for the wildfire situation. It's a way to keep track of people and to run a command structure.
So on this, we have operations section, Lawrence County, search and rescue, Blackwood. Is Blackwood with TEMA?
He was at the time our Director of Emergency Management in Murray County. He is now retired.
This says, what is this?
Our first that was the first mission we did, or the first hasty search that we did, they assigned us to.
And what's this breakdown?
The
Starting with Team 1.
Team 1, that was my team. I was head of it. Our assignment was to check vehicles, and then the perimeter, which is, it just says vehicles on there, but we checked the perimeter and everything. Team 2 was assigned to the 2 outbuildings on the property.
And we're talking about 1112 Garden.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Their mission was that. Team 3 was team leader Henley and Gandy. They cleared the structure. Team 4 was the crawl space. It was Officer Ryan and Carlton. They cleared the crawl space under the trailer or under the home. The next one was a perimeter again, was Officer Barber and Deputy Birdsong with the Sheriff's Department in Murray County. They cleared the exterior also. But it was almost like a redundant search with us. And then medical was Supervisor Doug Vineyard. When we deploy on any mission, we carry our own EMS with us, ALS support. In case something goes wrong with us, we have our people that we trust.
So this is a support position,
Yes,
providing medical support to your team.
yes, sir. And if something was, if the child was located, he would have been more like, if we found it, would have been first one there to help treat.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
Mark is exhibit 40.
Mr. Bailey, can you identify that photograph?
Yes, I can.
What is that?
It is the upside down photo of the residence that was documented, the sketch, rough sketch, on the back of that previous page.
So it's the sketch for Operation 1.
Yes, sir.
Put that on the screen. Would this be Garner's Creek Road?
Yes, sir.
Look, I mean, this is obviously a rough sketch, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was it intended to be to scale?
No, sir. It is just to make a documentation.
And let's point out some of the things that you noted in this sketch. What is this?
That is the home, the residence.
What's this?
Those are the 2 outbuildings.
What are these?
That is the blue 18-wheeler tractor trailer, and the 2 in the pickup truck that contained bags of trash, and the red car,
All right. What's this?
the open septic tank, or yes, septic tank.
And obviously, from my view, this is upside down. Does that say open sewer?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And was that septic tank drained?
We did request through, I believe, the TEMA to request a sump truck from a septic company to respond out there to drain the septic tank in order for us to clear 100% that nothing was located.
And what's this say?
The swing set,
That's in the background?
yes, sir.
Backyard?
Yes, sir.
And over here?
Where I located the vomit and disturb ground.
Does that say bushes?
Yes, sir.
And below that vomit?
Yes, sir.
Move that to the next exhibit.
Exhibit 41.
Mr. Bailey, let's go to your second mission. Can you identify that document?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
This is our second mission that when we started searching some of their surrounding homes.
All right, let's put that on the screen. Same kind of breakdown?
Yes, sir.
No need to go through it individually, but barn, house, canine, does that say creek?
Yes, sir.
And again, you got the medical person?
Yes, sir.
And second mission.
Yes, sir.
Move that to the next exhibit.
Mark is 43.
Can you identify that?
Yes, I can.
What is that?
Let me correct myself, 42 is the last exhibit.
This is the sketch, rough sketch on the backside of that previous page of the second mission.
So you have, and again, is this to scale?
No, sir.
This is just documenting where you went?
Yes, sir.
It looks like multiple addresses, correct?
Yes, sir.
What's this address?
This is 1115.
What's that?
That would be the basement or the crawl space. No, the basement of that structure, yes.
Here?
That is I think he scratched it, but it looks like barn, maybe.
Barn?
or something. I don't know what he wrote there. I can't do it. Boat, and maybe the boat, it was the boat. There was a boat parked in that driveway. That is the barn.
What's this?
Maybe kennel, maybe?
And what about this address?
1108, the outside sweep, there was no one home. That was the house that no one was there.
What does that mean, an outside suite?
Of course, the doors were locked, so we're not gonna make entry without permission, but we just check everything around bushes, behind bushes, under porches, under doors, anything that we think that anyone could crawl up under. You'd be surprised where kids would go.
And this address?
1101, again, that's the one that no one was home either, and we did the crawl space. That's the barn that I referred to that was in the back of it, that's on the northern part of the property, the area.
Move that as the next exhibit. Mr. Bailey, can you identify this document?
Yes, this is the third one, the third mission we did, or third search.
Put that on the screen. Third operation or third mission, and what is safety, Brian?
Chief Bryan is our Special Operations Safety Officer. He is also the safety officer, training officer for the city of Spring Hill. We carry again him with us. When we deploy on any mission, we try to, especially out of county, we try to take all assets that would support our team and our team only.
Move that as the next exhibit.
44.
Can you identify this document?
Yes, this is the sketch of the previous page, the backside.
Put that on the screen.
1114, yes, sir.
14, perimeter and crawl space.
Yes, sir.
So if it says perimeter and crawl space, does that mean no one entered the house?
Correct. No one was entered the house. Either no one came to the door, or no one was home, or we weren't able to gain access or get permission to search that property. So we did, but we cleared the outside and the crawl space.
Move that as the next exhibit.
45.
All right, and finally, Mr. Bailey, just to again, kind of go over the different residences that your team went to. We had 112 Garner Street,
Yes, sir.
1108 Garner Street,
Yes, sir.
1114 Garner Street,
Yes, sir.
1115 Garner Street,
Yes, sir.
and I don't have this one labeled, but you testified, you searched this,
Yes, sir.
and 1101 Garner Street.
Yes, sir. 1115 is where the boat was. That's where the boat was. Yes, the boat was in that driveway. I do remember.
I have 1 second. Pass the witness.
Cross-examine. The city council to the side. We've got a cubby hole around here that I made them all come back there so I could talk to them. But ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, one of the things we were talking about is we're going to finish with this witness before we break for lunch. I know they're bringing lunch in for you. That may put us to 12:30 roughly or so, but that should work out all right with your lunch. We're going to probably quit at 5 o'clock tonight because you have to be relocated, as you know. So we're going to try to get that taken care of for you. The last thing was that one of you have asked a question of this witness, and that what is the approximate height of the mantel where the lock and key were located. I'm not sure that he knows, but I'm going to ask it for him. Do you know where the lock and key were located on the mantel, how high that mantel is approximately?
I can't.
All right, that's fine.
Sir, I'm sorry.
I think there may be other witnesses who can testify about that issue, so we'll just reserve that question. Thank you. Mr. Lockhart, you may cross-examine.
Officer Bailey, how many days did you work in regard to the search effort at this location?
I was there just for the first day on the 4th.
All right. And how many dogs would have been working that area that day? Do you have any idea?
From our team, 2.
All right. And what about other teams?
I can't speak for them.
Okay. And where all did your 2 dogs work?
I did not go with the handlers, so I do not know where they worked.
Did you see dogs working in the Daniels residence yard?
I didn't witness our team's dogs work the yard.
And what parts of the yard did they work?
They started a track from the back of the residence, and then they went on their own. I did not follow them.
All right. When they left, did they go out from the back out, or did one of the dogs go to the front of the house, then the front yard?
Again, I saw them start from the back, and then they went on their mission and had their assignment. I don't know. I did not follow them at that point. I stayed on my assignment.
So you didn't see, to your knowledge, a dog working in the front yard of the house?
Not to my knowledge.
Right. And did you overhear any conversations from the folks in the house about the amount of time that Joe Clyde Daniels had been missing?
I did not know.
And do you know if they discussed the fact that the amount of time passing indicates that the child could be dead?
I did not hear anything of that, no.
All right. And Mr. Daniels told you what he thought happened in regard to Joe Clyde getting out?
Yes.
He didn't tell
believe
you
so.
that did happen. He just told you that's what he thought might have happened.
He told me what he found and what he believed happened at that point.
And did you go over to the coffee table to see how easily it would roll on the floor?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you notice that the coffee table was on casters or rollers that made it easy to push?
No, I did not. I did not examine the coffee table.
And based on looking at the coffee table, would a child over 4 foot tall be able to stand on that coffee table and take a lock off the latch?
Without doing proper measurements, sir, I can't answer that question.
All right. Were you ever requested to do a search at a house where that same morning a mother had reported that her child's footwear were taken off her porch?
No, sir.
So no one ever requested you take a dog up there and try to pick up a scent from that area?
I was not responsible for the dogs at that time, so no, sir.
And were you ever requested to send people to that location and do a search?
I'm not aware of that, sir.
So you were not requested. I'm asking, were you requested? You said you're not aware. You would be aware if someone asked you to do it, wouldn't you?
I was not requested.
Okay. And by the same token, were you requested to either take people to or take a dog to a location where a lady said her little girl saw a little boy in dirty pajamas?
No.
If you had been requested to go to those locations and search and take dogs, you would have done so, wouldn't you?
If we were requested.
All right. The septic tank, you testified was uncovered. And did you try to find out why it was uncovered?
I personally did not.
All right. And did you observe shovels at the residence that would have been used to dig the dirt off the top of the septic tank?
I did not observe any shovels.
The vomit that you saw was approximately how far from the Daniels residence?
Approximately maybe 200 feet.
All right. And did scent dogs, to your knowledge, were they used to pick up or try to pick up a scent at that location?
I do not know if they went that way or not.
Did you ask that the vomit be tested to see if a dog had thrown that up?
We passed that on to Sheriff Bledsoe and advised him what was located.
And would you have liked to known if that was a dog throw up or human throw up?
Yes, I would.
Approximately when did they begin draining the pond?
I can't answer that. It was in process before we arrived.
Okay. And what would just everyday people think if they've lost a child and they see law enforcement draining a pond?
I can't speak for what everyday people would think, sir.
So you don't think adults would be worried the child was dead if they're draining a pond? They think their child was.
Mr. Lockard's asking for his opinion, which he objected when I asked.
Well, I sustained an objection that the defense made to you asking him what he believed at that time, and I would be, in fairness, have to sustain this objection because I think that's the same principle. You're asking him to suppose what people generally would think, and I think that's an inappropriate question. Sustain the objection.
So you're not in a position to even give an opinion on that, is that correct?
I don't believe I'm in the position to give an opinion on that, sir.
That's all the questions I have.
Redirect. Thank you, sir. You may step down, and I assume we're releasing him from the subpoena, correct? You are released from your subpoena. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I believe that'll bring us to our lunchtime hour, so we'll go ahead and take our lunch recess. Let's be in recess till 1:15. We'll be in recess till 1:15.
All rise.
Recording stopped.
This court is in recess.
Deputy Cox, when you finish, I need